5 GOP lawmakers have made a pilgrimage to New York's Columbia University in the last week, ostensibly to show support for Jewish students who are pro-Zionist and to speak out against the protesters. House Speaker Mike Johnson arrived Wednesday, where he and other GOP lawmakers called for Columbia President Shafik to resign for failing to quickly dismantle the pro-Palestinian encampment, and in their view, not doing enough to make sure that the pro-Zionist Jewish students feel safe on campus. Upon his arrival, the speaker was met with boos. Here's some of what he had to say to students.
As Columbia has allowed these lawless agitators and radicals to take over, the virus of anti-Semitism is spread across other campuses.
During his speech, Johnson said he'll demand President Joe Biden send in the National Guard to campus.
New York Representative Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez spoke on the protests taking place on college campuses across the country.
It is especially important that we remember the power of young people shaping this country today, of all days, as we once again witness the leadership of those peaceful student-led protests on campuses like Columbia, Yale, Berkeley, and many others.
New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik responded to AOC's remarks, writing on X, "There's nothing peaceful about assaulting Jewish students and calling for genocide. The far left continues gaslighting Americans as they support radical pro-terror anti-Semites."
Yeah, so it's amazing. It's actually very telling how each of these representatives, when they speak, have to trade in outright lies, debunked stories. Like, for example, there's Stefanik there talking about assault. The only even alleged assault is the one that I debunked in my radar yesterday. I strongly encourage everybody to go watch, where a student was waving a small little plastic flag and another student claims that it stabbed her in the eye with the flagpole. Video suggests that it was nothing of the sort. So Stefanik is now saying that people are assaulting Jewish students when the reality is that hundreds of students, many of them Jewish, have been rounded up and arrested by the police because they're protesting a plausible genocide in Gaza. Here's another instance of outright lies from some of these representatives. Here's a clip of Mike Johnson's remarks about what was happening at these protests, where he evokes this idea that babies were burned in ovens on October 7th. Let's take a look.
Some of these students apparently are unaware of the atrocities of October 7th, or they're denying it. They deny that women and children were brutally raped and murdered, that infants were placed into ovens and cooked alive. The things that happened there are unspeakable, and yet they're out there waving flags for the very people who committed those atrocities. This is not who we are.
Now, he also referred to the 40 beheaded baby lie, thoroughly debunked. One baby was tragically killed on October 7th, and that child was not beheaded. So what do you make of the fact that these representatives, in making the case to send the National Guard to round up student protesters, are forced to basically dramatically misrepresent and lie about not just what happened on October 7th, but what's happening on campus?
Okay, yes, October 7th was horrible enough and needs no embellishment. We've seen the bodies, the people shot in their homes, killed at a music festival, some of them stripped naked, their wrists, their hands zip-tied behind them. Draw your own conclusions about that. Doesn't need to go beyond that. In terms of the assaults taking place, well, look, the students did, as I pointed out many times, formed a human chain to eject the counter-protesters or people just coming in their midst who were Jewish. They're saying are Zionists. I don't know how they can tell if they're Zionists. They just look Jewish to them and everyone's
Wait a minute,
Zionist.
that's not true,
That
Robby.
is assault if you do that.
Robby.
Yes, that is true.
These are Jewish students who are pro-Palestine conducting a Seder and doing prayer services on campus. I specifically want to make sure that they these representatives keep characterizing it as against Jewish students. It is Jewish students that are bearing I wouldn't say the brunt, but a significant disproportionate amount of the harms that are coming from sending in state actors to round them off and hold them up to jail.
But you said there's no assaults taking place.
And referring to them as,
which is not true.
Wanting to protect the interests of Jewish students when you're calling for them to be arrested, and meanwhile—
I'm not calling for anybody to be arrested.
I'm talking about Mike Johnson. Obviously, I don't think you, Robby, sitting at this desk is empowered to call for anybody to do anything at all. I hope that's really clear. The point that I'm making is that these representatives are weaponizing and exploiting the idea that Jewish students are under attack when it's so many Jewish students who are the ones that are being attacked because of the actions that these people are calling upon.
There are Jewish
and the students that they are being protested against are not being protested because they are Jewish, as evidenced by the fact that so many of the protesters are Jewish. They're being protested. They're not being singled out because they're Jewish. The Jewish students are protesting.
Jewish protesters
they're being
on both
singled out
sides
because
of this
they're
conflict.
yes, they're being singled out because they are Zionists, because they are pro-Israel. And there are Jewish Zionists, there are Catholic Zionists, there are all kinds of Zionists across the religious and ethnic spectrum. But they are not being attacked because of who they are. And conservatives keep trying to make this about some kind of personal religious persecution when it is not. It's about whether or not in the United States of America we have the right, student protesters and everybody else, to criticize a foreign state that is called Israel, that is enacting policies and doing things that the international community has warned us is plausibly a genocide, and whether or not American tax dollars should be funding it, and principally at Columbia, whether or not students' endowment should be going to weapons manufacturers in Israel and other kinds of
you have the right to protest. That's not
economic
up
support
for,
of Israel.
That's not even up for debate. It is obvious. They have the right to
up
protest.
for debate. We're debating it.
Well, they're correct. The protesters get to do that. They get to non-violently protest Columbia, the state of Israel, whatever they want. They can put up signs. The signs can be anti-Semitic. They're allowed to engage in anti-Semitic protesting if they want to. That is all consistent with the First Amendment, and no state force should be brought to bear against them for doing that. Now, I have seen a lot of the protesters also making assertions that are totally incorrect, trying to harass people who are videotaping them, saying you're not allowed to videotape us. That's not true. They're out in the public, and people can take video of them as they want, can expose what they're doing. That is how it works. So they don't have some special right to protest and face no scrutiny from the public, as they seem to be asserting in multiple cases. They don't have the right to eject people from their midst, and they don't have the right to permanently occupy the space with tents, which are being disassembled now, consistent with
our elected officials, the powerful people in Congress who actually have authority over how we live our lives and what our freedoms are. This is some of what they said when Mike Johnson was asked specifically how he feels about the Jewish protesters, since he is pantomiming all of this concern about the substantive interests of Jewish people in America. He was asked specifically, what is your message to anti-Zionist Jews inside the camp celebrating Shabbat? Mike Johnson said, I don't know who's in that camp, which is pretty telling about the level of ignorance, not only lying blatantly and embarrassingly about babies cooked in ovens and 40 beheaded babies. Mike Lawler was the Republican representative who attended the event that day, talking about beheaded babies. Again, a widely debunked story. What does it mean for our representatives who are still voting to do things like send billions of dollars to Israel, voting to do things like censor their own colleagues for saying from the river to the sea, knowing that they are so either deeply ignorant or willing to trade in such obvious falsehoods is really deeply disturbing, don't you think? Are they basing their decisions in Congress on being misled or buying into lies that have been disproven months ago?
I mean, I think Mike Johnson is trying to distract right now from the flack he's taking, frankly, from the right for having sold out on Ukraine and the principles that FISA, everything else that MAGA does care, the actual base, the actual voters care about. He sold them out entirely. So now he's doing a photo op he picked for Republicans, for conservatives, the least sympathetic group of people, protesters at a college campus, and is making fun of them to score points, to cover for the bad policies that were just implemented under his watch, in direct contradiction of what the conservative base says it's wanted for weeks and months and years. So
I'm not sure that standing in front of hundreds of people and getting booed is quite the photo op that these representatives hope for.
Well, it is if you're on the right.
And I do think that AOC...
There's nobody on the right agrees with the protesters.
Who cares?
Well, he's a conservative figure. He's trying to shore up his support among conservatives.
Well, a lot of people on the right.
Go fight with college students. You'll get applause.
I looked through some of my comments. I don't usually, but I looked through some of my comments on my radar yesterday, and there were quite a few conservatives who say, I don't usually agree with Brie. I don't even agree with these students are fighting for. But watching, and we're going to stick around because we have a segment coming up all about the explosive violence from the police officers against the students at the University of Austin, Texas. But that people are saying this is obviously a bad look. I don't believe that cops in the National Guard should be kneeling on the necks of students in Harvard Yard or at the University of Austin, Texas, or Columbia, or any university across the country.
I don't think that either, but I
just gone too
don't
far.
think you understand how unpopular, how embarrassing, how silly student protesters look.
You can keep saying
most
it,
of
but
the
that
rest of the
doesn't seem to
country.
be what the impression is of the broader public.
I mean,
If polls
absolutely.
if polls are any indication.
What polls indicate that people are
polls
like,
that
good,
show
go
overwhelming
for...
majorities of America think that Israel has gone too far, and that's what these students are
62%
fighting for.
of American Jews agree with everything Israel's doing. You're trying to pretend that it's
No, I'm
all
not- I'm
Jewish
not trying to
people on the other
first of all,
side. No, Jewish people in America are supportive of what
First of all, I don't know
Israel's
what
doing.
poll you're reading, but it's absolutely not true. It was the 50% of Jewish Americans want a ceasefire, and a smaller number of that. It's not a majority of Jewish people want to see an immediate ceasefire, but it is 50%. And the number who don't want a ceasefire is like 30-something%. So I honestly don't know what you're talking
Reading from the
about.
Washington Post, 62% of American Jews say Israel's war conduct is acceptable.
All right, we'll have to do a whole nother segment where we do tit for tat on polling because
Well, you summon polling to support your position
no,
all the time, so I'm doing-
that's fine. Well, but we don't I think need polls to understand most of the public. Just like when they saw a cop kneeling on George Floyd's neck for minutes until he was killed, that college students who are simply using the First Amendment right to protest a genocide in Gaza shouldn't also have their necks being kneeled on Harvard's campus per a video that is circulating
Well, that's
right
the
now that we can't show from on
that's
the
the Mott and Bailey. Yes, I agree with that. Of course, obviously.
All right, more Rising coming up next.